Hello and welcome to another Lighthouse Wellness Community podcast. My name is Donagh McKeown.
My name is Frank O'Connor. This program is designed to encourage open conversation around wellness, mindfulness and healing. As part of the Irish diaspora, Donagh and I like to bring an Irish dimension to this conversation. Our hope is to break through the stigma around mental health issues and to bring awareness to the many ways to recovery and to a healthy way of life.
And welcome back.
Thank you, Donagh. It's good to be back.
Yes, you've been away for a week or two, or it seems like 2 centuries actually, visiting the heart of Celtic culture.
Yeah, back over in the homeland. It was great. Really good tour. Some great time with family. Our grandson, our new grandson, Arthur, who lives in Basel in Switzerland, Arthur O'Connor.
Why didn't they call him Basil?
I have to talk to Brian about that. Was christened in Ireland, so all the gang assembled. Frank Jr. came in from California. Barry came in from Tokyo in Japan. He lives in Tokyo. Brian, of course, came in from Switzerland, and we came in as well. So it was nice. It was really nice to have everybody. And then we also had an opportunity to take a group of Americans on a 5-day tour of the west of Ireland. That was our first adventure into the touring, which you and I obviously have spoken about. And just as an FYI, Donagh and I are putting together a tour of Ireland in 2019, and we'll be talking about that. Baimi J. Count, as our good friend says, we will be talking. We'll bring that up later. But it was wonderful, a great experience. The weather was beautiful, and boy, when the west of Ireland gets good weather, that's spectacular.
It's heaven on earth, I have to say. Not quite as nice as County Armagh, but sure, no worse.
Well, it's, there's one for a county in Ireland, right? The county of Armagh. Armagh is a beautiful county. It's just there's no water, that's all. But other than that, it's great.
We'll talk about, because I'd like to reflect with you, maybe at a later stage, maybe not on today's podcast, where you see Ireland in terms of meditation or that kind of belief that we've got something there that's worth sharing in the terms that we talk about. But we'll leave that to another time. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I still think there's an ambience there of calmness, or at least in certain parts.
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked on a number of occasions, and I've responded to the question, how would you describe Ireland? And almost every time I've used the word mystical, because it's the only word that seems to really fit into what I perceive Ireland to be. Because like you said, essentially once you get off the plane, you feel the energy of that country straight away. Again, it's something that Donagh, you and I have both talked about. Again, I'll just throw it out to our audience. One of the tours we're looking at doing is a mystical tour of Ireland, or the sacred Ireland, places like Newgrange and Skellig Island, on all of these beautiful mystical sites that are there. So there's 2 separate tours, but we'll be talking about those as we move along.
So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today then.
Yeah, one of the things that came up sitting looking out at the Atlantic Ocean on the west coast of Ireland was that sense of peace and stillness that you can get sitting there. And as I led the meditation, our weekly meditation, which was last night in Petaluma, we focused on what is stillness, what is silence, what is peace, and how can one access them on a daily basis. Second part of that is, how do you possibly still a mind that's swirling? You wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, bum, 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 it's going. And many people feel, I cannot stop that from going. So we want to talk about strategies to do that for sure today.
So let's go back again to the very start. Where does it all begin?
So the basic recognition that thought just can spontaneously occur out of nowhere. So the first part would be the recognition of that. And a good way, because once you recognize it has no longer got the full control that it had before. So for example, where does my attention go? When the mind is swirling out of control, attention is fully engaged with the mind. If you do something as simple as bring attention to your hands, for example. And this could be 2 o'clock in the morning. Think about this for a moment. There's energy. If you just hold your hands together and say, yeah, there's something happening there within my hands, and you begin to feel like a little tingling or an energy source, and you'll immediately think, oh, yeah, there's energy permeating through my body, and I can feel it there in my hands. That takes a moment to access that. But in the process of doing that, I now have removed attention away from the swirling mind. The next step then is go through the physical body. Can I bring attention to my head area, to my shoulders, to my arms, to my belly, to my legs, to my feet, to my toes? And just in that simple way, we begin to take attention away from the thinking mind. The second thing that begins to happen is the realization that the thinking mind is spontaneously firing off. And it has led me to believe down through many years of practice that I am that thinking mind. I become what I'm thinking about. For example, I get into a situation in my mind where I'm worried about something that happened earlier on in the day. I can easily then become a worrisome person. Does that mean that's who I am? In that moment, if that's what I'm accessing and believing, therefore I am. However, if I can separate momentarily from the thought pattern, I have an option now. I have a choice. Oh, I don't have to be that worrisome person. So that initial, first point, just can I draw attention away from that thinking mind? Noticing that it is just a thought, and as you say, stop the thinking button. I'll come back to your first point there, and it's something that is easy to relate to within the practice of Reiki. Reiki is the idea of bringing energy from the whole universe and bringing it through yourself firstly, and then perhaps through that person. And it's exactly the same. You can actually feel the energy in your hands, and that you're basically, and it sounds hoodoo, whatever you want to call it, but it really does work, because I felt this, and other people who I've given it to and other people around the world feel that energy, a heat or whatever it might be, and heat is energy, whatever way you describe it. So I understand that calming, very, very much so. It takes practice to go into this space. It takes a procedure, if you like. Exactly like your procedure. The procedure is that you call in the inspiration from the universe. But no doubt it's the same thing, because you're calling for inspiration within yourself to be disciplined or whatever it might be, to get to that calm place and just bringing it through thereafter. So it's easy to relate to. Absolutely, Don. And here's a simple technique anybody can, if you want to try this at home, very, very simple. If you just take a moment, rub your hands together like so, just let them rub, and then have a slight gap in your hands like so. And you will immediately feel a tingling, a warm sensation. And for some people, it might even be a cool sensation. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you begin to move your hands apart, the question is, can you still feel it? And even further and further, I'm like, wow, it's still there. Now do the following. Bring them in really close together, and you will feel the accentuation or the multiplication of that energy source. It begins to get more intense. So it's there. I mean, we don't have to. I mean, science people will tell you, yeah, we can measure that. We can measure that easily. The whole reason for doing that in relation to the mind is to draw attention, focus away from the mind, not to control the thinking mind per se, because that begins to get too much of a job. Let's forget about trying to control it. Much easier to think, I recognize your mind, but I'm going to take attention away from you. And as we begin to move into that and spend more time just like going through the body, the next part would be, can I focus attention on my breath? Because breath is ever present, always moving. Don't have to do anything. Breathing happens automatically. So just tapping into something that's automatically happening, bringing attention to that, just watching the breath in and out. Some people will count, for example, breathing in and out to the count of 1, breathing in and out to the count of 2, and so on. Or just watching breath. As we do that, we begin to realize, oh, the mind is beginning to slow down. So that's point number one. Can I get it to slow, instead of this swirling, frantic thing? Get it to slow down. Here's what's beginning to happen. If I think in the center of a circle or a spinning wheel, at the very core of that, there's a stillness. Everything on the further out you go, the more activity that's going on. Hurricane, powerful force of energy, nature. In the core, there's stillness. Tornado, in the core, there's stillness. So even though everything is swirling in our mind, there is a core, there's a stillness, and all we're doing is learning to access that.
Well, a couple of things strike me that we first of all, we come from a society that's dependent on something happening, whether that's noise, music, television, radio, whatever it is. We built the society around that so that we can't live in silence. That something's wrong when I'm in silence. I'm with myself. That's too scary. Something bad is going to happen because I can't hear anything. So we're kind of programmed that way, even from babies. Who perhaps when they don't hear anything, maybe they do hear it, but they programmed that we react when we hear that. That's a natural kind of thing. But we're programmed. So a realization that maybe taking some of that external programming, we don't even know that it's there, and just switching some of those things off so that you're in silence. And here's the contradiction, actually, that sometimes it's even better to do some of this with a background of a continuous piece of music. And I probably know why. You probably know why too. Because that piece of music is actually kind of focusing a little bit of that brain, if you like, on the pattern of that music, on the rhythm, the beat of that music, and that is slowing our heart down. Because as you know, music, we go to the beat of the music. So that must be part of it too.
I mean, couldn't have said that better, Donagh. Every Wednesday when we do our meditation here at One Mind Dharma in Petaluma, I play music I do a guided meditation and then immediately begin to play music. Now, why would I do that while our intention is to go to peace and silence? For the very point that you made. In the stillness is probably a better word. In the stillness, there is always Rumi. I'll go to Rumi for example. Rumi talks about the dance of the spirit. There's always movement and activity, even though it's perfectly still. Energetically, if you look at an atom or a molecule, there's still, it's moving, there's frequency, there are things happening. So all we're trying to do, and music is a wonderful way to do this, is begin to slow down the thinking, egoistic mind. And music has a beautiful way of doing that because it draws us in. It brings attention to frequency, to vibration, to a sound that is soothing. And in the process of doing that, it begins to shut down the thinking mind, which is what causes most people much trouble, much trouble. Even to the point, you and I spoke before beginning, bad memories. What are bad memories? How do you deal with bad memories? If I can take a moment to realize that's just another thought sparking off, boom, there it goes. And I have emotion, energy and motion attached to that bad memory. If I can, for a moment, take a look at it and see it for what it is, a thought pattern, I then again can choose to say something like, that's what happened back then. I am now living in the present moment. If I allow the memory to feel, to get emotion, I'm now living in the memory. By choosing to see it for what it is, a thought pattern, I gain the choice back of coming into the present moment and saying, I see you, memory. I see you, thought pattern. I actually recognize and acknowledge your presence. However, I recognize also that that is not truly who I am in the stillness at the core. So I honor you, I recognize you, but I choose not to partake.
It's a technique within neuro-linguistic programming, though you allow the person to do that within themselves, that you bring them back to the memory and you show that memory from above, another perspective. You're changing the perception of that, and it's another way of saying you're releasing that emotion that's attached to it. There was nothing wrong with feeling that emotion then, or even now, briefly. But if it's paining you for such a time, you really have to kind of address and maybe detach and allow the emotion perhaps just to flow through and let it go.
You know, a great way to acknowledge what you said, because guilt is usually tied up with, bad memories or remorse. The simple realization that the state of consciousness I was in, I'll talk about myself, when some of those things happened in my life that I certainly wished hadn't happened. That state of consciousness is not the state of consciousness that I occupy today. So Frank today, with the consciousness of this moment, would not, I would see it completely differently. So that's important to recognize for each one of us. The state of consciousness back as a 17-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old, whatever it may be, is not the same state of consciousness as a 60-year-old. And just acknowledging that can help too. That was then, this is now. If there's residual things about the past, and we've spoken about that, where maybe I need to take action and go to people and acknowledge my pardon and ask for forgiveness, that's great. And that's part of that process. But the real end result is, can I stop living there and only live here in the moment?
I had an example yesterday. We were talking about it beforehand, without going into the details of why or what and who said what and he said what and I said whatever. I felt emotion. And I'm fairly level, and I understand emotion is important, and I love joy in my life, and I love the experience. But something triggered me. It wasn't the other person's fault, but something triggered within me. And as we've been talking, a kind of a reflection that told me more about myself rather than what the person said as an individual. Something was residual in my character or my belief system that was holding on to anger attached to that. And it clearly goes back to whatever it goes back to. I can't analyse just at this second. It told me I reacted and I became angry. So there's something within me that's connected with that type of interchange. And I am now in the process of trying to figure out why, but more importantly, trying to release the guilt that I had for feeling that way, or the guilt attached to whatever I was contemplating on. So thank you for kind of putting that into context. But
yeah, I mean, absolutely, Donagh. Every one of us has the opportunity, moment by moment, day by day, to let, as those thoughts arise, because that whatever happened is gone, right? It's gone. So now I'm left with a memory. We're back to the memory. So my choice, moment by moment, is recognize the memory for what it is. And if there's something in there that I see insight about myself, wow, take the insight, move it and take the insight. And then realize that all that I'm left with is letting it go. Release, let it go. So, for example, in a case where somebody does or says something that hurts, before it goes to resentment, can I take a moment? And the way I learned to do the following was by going to the place of looking at myself as a 6-year-old boy, seeing the innocence, and we've talked about this before, seeing the innocence and sacredness of this little 6-year-old boy who could not be held responsible for things that were happening around him. And by me talking to him and saying, I understand the pain that's surrounding you right now, and I have deep compassion for you as a 6-year-old boy. How could one not, in other words? By taking that approach, looking at the other person, regardless of who or what they may be, if I can go to the innocence of that person, much easier for me to forgive, first of all, myself, and then forgive the other person. But there's a process, and learning some of these strategies are very important.
So for me, I was making a judgment. I was making a judgment about what the person has said, how it affected me. I got to get out of that moment where I make that judgment. I got to forgive myself for making it. forgive whatever transgressions I believe that other person was or wasn't projecting. So that is that's a true lesson for me now. Just to kind of see it's none of my business in a way, but it's also another buffer that I can put in the next time that I engage in that style of conversation, or a realization that they are only words, that it doesn't have to be something that brings about anger to me.
I mean, thanks for sharing that, because that's something, there's not one human being out there that does not relate to what you just spoke about, Donagh, me included. The two big things that come to mind for me, two statements. One, hurt people hurt people. I know we've spoken about that before. So there's a strong possibility if somebody else is either lashing out or saying things to me, there's hurt involved in that. The second big statement to me, and I love this one, boy, from the moment I heard it, I'm like, whoa, and that is, what you think of me is none of my business. And there's a hugely freeing element in that. It is absolutely none of my business what somebody else thinks about me. What I can do, and only I can do, is choose how I respond to that person. And one of the beautiful things I heard was, I choose to love you regardless of whether you like it or not. Like, there's massive freedom involved in that. There's massive freedom involved in that. So it takes me immediately to compassion. And it also frees me up from worrying about what other people think. And going back to the stillness, if the mind is firing off and I'm caught up in all of those thoughts, it's difficult for me to access some of these strategies we're talking about. If the mind is still, these are the things that will automatically come up, if that makes sense. They'll just automatically come up of their own accord. The healing energy begins to percolate, because it's just sitting there all the time. For example, having an example from last night, we were in a beautiful still place in the midst of our meditation. And the realization within me was, that stillness was always there. If I go back over my life and think of times where there was great mental stress, deep, disturbing mental stress, I asked the question, even when the mental stress was going on, was the stillness present? Was it at the core always still? And I have to answer, yeah, I see that. I can see, even in the midst of my own deep disturbance, there was a stillness. The only thing that was missing was an ability to access it. I wasn't accessing it, that's all. But it was there.
So now we have some of the tools to access and continue to do so. We're going to do a meditation separately from now on, but we will give access to those meditations. So briefly, give us a quick breathing in and out for 2 or 3 seconds without going into that previously used kind of scenario of playing the music and whatever, because we're talking about it. Let's put a little bit of it into practice.
No, great idea. So with the meditation, what Donagh is saying exactly correct. We're going to do, as opposed to just tying on a quick 5-minute meditation at the end of each podcast, we'll be making free access to 15, 20, 30-minute meditations that will be available on Celtic Mindfulness and Lighthouse community on our Facebook page. Please, just click on sign up. Also check out our YouTube. We'll have them accessible there. Celtic Mindfulness and Donagh McKeown. I'm sure they'll be there too. Frank O'Connor. Just click on subscribe, be a member, and we'll be putting free access to the meditations and our podcasts on there, so you always have them. So having said that, simple technique that we mentioned at the beginning, I'll just go over it again. If the mind is crazy, try the following. First of all, just close your eyes. If that's difficult, pick a spot in the floor in front of you that you can have a gaze, just a soft gaze on the floor. And just do the following. Say to yourself, I'm now choosing to bring attention away from my thinking mind and bring it to my breathing. And just say to yourself, I'm going to breathe in the following way. I'll breathe in and out to the count of 1. brief pause. I'll breathe in and out to the count of 2. Rest. Breathing in and out to the count of 3. Rest. And do that from 1 to 10. When you reach 10, simply begin again at 1. And that's the process. As the mind pops in, and it will. We're not trying to control the mind. We're simply shifting attention. If the mind interferes, simply remind yourself and the mind, I acknowledge that you're there, thinking mind. However, I'm choosing to bring attention back to my breath. If you find yourself counting, oh, I'm at 25 all of a sudden, I've gone way beyond 10. That's okay. Simply, gently is the key. Come back to the count of 1. And that's the process. You don't really have to do anything else. And that's mindful meditation in its very essence.
And it will be quite amazing and revelatory for you when you do. And the more you enjoy doing it, the more, I can't even use the word sensibilities. I just know that some truths come through, some maybe universal truths, some things that you couldn't have imagined. You've calmed yourself to believe, I know in my case when I do it, particularly when I'm vexed beforehand, that there is a sense of peace, that this is all going to be okay, that things are working out. And that in itself is more than a gift.
Yeah, we're learning to access that stillness that's always present. If you go out into space, into the universe, at its core you just find nothingness, emptiness, but also stillness. Even though things are revolving and moving, there's always a core, there's always a center of stillness present. And that's what we're accessing. And that's freely available to everybody. You don't have to pay for it, you don't have to do anything. I love the one, there was a guy talking one time, a psychologist who was saying, all this talk about mindfulness meditation and people saying all about its benefits, about bringing health benefits and slowing down your breathing and slowing down your heart, slowing down your blood pressure. He says, seriously, if you just sit and relax, you'll do the same thing. And I'm like, exactly. Exactly correct. Just sit and relax and breathe. But he was mixing up, that's not, that is meditation.
Yeah. It's being in that relaxed state. Thanks for bringing a nice relaxed state back again. We'll be here next week. We'll have more news, hopefully, on the tour as it progresses to Ireland. Certainly one type of tour, perhaps the Mystic tour within the next while too. Give us your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, please.
We're delighted to hear from you. And the details will be within the video today and indeed in the comments section below. And thank you for listening to another Lighthouse Wellness Community podcast. My name is Donagh.
My name is Frank O'Connor. Namaste, everybody. Thank you.